I am reading The Laird and the Lady. It's a novel by Joan Marshall Grant. She wrote books of her farm memories, but this one is a fiction. And it was published in 1949, and it starts in a romantic French chateau where the lad and the lady meet. She is an American millionaires traveling incognito to escape from fortune hunters. We are now in chapter 12. It's entitled The Other Avalon. On his way south, Rowan had spent 2 days with Duncan at a small hotel in Montparnasse. They had gone there because Duncan preferred the left bank, and Rowan had heard it was cheap, which for him was usually the first consideration. Economy had been preached as a stark religion by Georgina. Every extravagance was represented as a theft from Cloud. Every shilling saved an increase in its protection against the rising flood of taxes that gnawed at diminishing income. Capital was something sacred, to be guarded for future generations and used only in dire emergency or when honor demanded. It had rebuilt a farm that was struck by lightning and so was not covered by fire insurance. It had brought an annuity for a ploughman who had been gorged by a bull. It provided a ticket to Australia for a third cousin who brought discredit on the name and had to be induced to leave Scotland. £1 each term was all that Georgina considered necessary as pocket money for Winchester. Rowan's clothes had come from Inverness, ready-made. When he protested, she said, "Sir Rowan is not a vulgarian who must pretend he has more money than he is free to spend." "But it's difficult, Georgina, being different to the other men," the boy had protested. "If they offend you, fight them," was the only comfort she gave him. So he had fought, until a record of broken noses and blackened eyes earned him a healthy if grudging respect. He became captain of our game, a particularly belligerent variety of rugger peculiar to the school. That he would have much preferred to play rackets, which he could not afford, was a fact he kept strictly to himself. He accelerated until the needle of the speedometer steadied at 120 kilometers, a gesture to show that he was no longer to be restrained by counsels of expediency, which would have reminded him that the tires were worn. Marylda had accepted that they must reach Paris tonight. Rowan liked making plans, and once made, they became a rigorous master. It would be unwise to try to teach him a more comfortable way of life too soon. So she was surprised when he swung the car into the courtyard of a hotel in Avalon. Avalon? What could be more suitable for us, she said. King Arthur and all that. Though the other Avalon only had one L. Guinevere is your most devoted spouse, but no tourney. No tourneys, dear Arthur. I refuse to sit in my box above the tilt yard, twisting a moist handkerchief in my lily hands. I should leap down to nobble your opponent's horse, or at least scream to put off his aim. Women no longer have the courage to remain spectators. Rowan, after his prolonged joust with the image of Georgina, during which he had driven so fast that Marylda's knees had trembled with the effort of leaving her legs relaxed, instead of bracing them against an imminent accident, was in a mood both benign and exhilarated. "This appears to be a most admirable dump," he affirmed as they left the car and went through the courtyard into a walled garden where stone seats were set with foresight of lovers in arbours discreetly hidden by flowering shrubs. "We will drink champagne and then consider whether it would not be foolish to drive further." The champagne, Gordon Rouge, was brought to them in the garden. They drank it in the presence of a Venus, who who clasped her marble draperies with no more than token modesty. For you, my darling, I will again pit my strength against the demons which infest French telephones. It is for you to decide whether we drive for several hours, with me becoming riddled with anxiety that we shall not get to Paris before lighting up time. I should much prefer to stay. It would be only polite to say a meaningful good morning to this Venus. That remark is only permissible after dark, for the bushes here are not yet sufficiently substantial to provide the privacy for which they have been considerately planted. The answer it deserves is also restricted by the waiter, who is observing us from what I take to be the door leading to the cellar. Madame la Patronne, who at 60 had not lost her eye for a personable young man, insisted on showing Rowan each of the 3 available bedrooms. He had forgotten to ask Marylda whether they should share one or if he ought to take another for himself and visit her discreetly. No, he had not really forgotten. He had simply taken it for granted that conventions would be respected until they were legally married. But since his mental defiance of Georgina, he took a different view. He chose a room with poppies on the wallpaper and a crimson satin eiderdown on the double bed. He filled up both registration slips and wrote Lady Cardry with a flourish. He decided it would be a waste of time to put trunk calls through to Paris. He wrote out 2 telegrams. One to the small hotel, cancelling the single room he had booked by wire the same morning. The other to the Ritz, reserving a suite. The price would be appalling, but he was going to give his bride a honeymoon in which they should have everything that they had never had before. They would have champagne whenever they felt like it. He would buy her clothes and flowers and jewels. Caution momentarily reasserted itself. No, not jewels, for the heirlooms would at last come out of the bank, where they were kept to save insurance, but certainly flowers, and why wait until they reached Paris? He found a flower shop in the square and bought an armful of roses, carrying them back with some embarrassment, for he realized they did not fit in with the picture of this staid married couple which he had tried to convey. Madame la Patronne was so touched when she saw him hurrying up the outside stair which led to their room that she made a mental note to reduce the bill. He had meant Marylda to think that a suite at the Ritz was nothing out of the ordinary, that it was as natural for him to go there as it would have been for Hector, his grandfather, the man who had always been held up as the hero without flaw, to emulate although impossible to equal. But when they were lying awake, for it seemed a waste of time to sleep, Rowan forgot to be the experienced man of the world and became the boy who had at last found the compliment from whom no secret of loneliness need be hid. She dare not tell him how closely his childhood resembled her own. She too had lived in a castle with many closed rooms, a house on the Hudson built in the 70s, an imitation French chateau of the most unfortunate period, which had cost grandfather $1 million. A spiteful governess had once told Marylda that it had also cost the lives of more than 200,000 pigs, which had been slaughtered and buried in the tins, which carried the label blackened super sausages from Chicago to the world. As a child, Marylda used to wake in the night and crouch under the bedclothes, trying to shut out the sound of train falling on the gravel sweep. It's so strange how sometimes it will just drain even though it was fairly full. So, because I don't know when I stop this, it's most irritating, I will have to listen back and then decide to read the rest of this chapter 12, The Other Avalon. So they have reached this little abode called Avalon, and they've decided to stay the night.